2021. Can we believe it? On this special day, and I chose a Sunday for a reason because I was hoping that everyone would be home and, around this time, either in the US or in Australia and other sides, it'd be early, late. In Holland here, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 p.m. We are live from Amsterdam, and today, as the title says, the interviewer gets interviewed. It is a great pleasure for me to interview a very strong woman who I've admired for a long time, who I've learned from a long time. And it's going to be quite nerve-wracking because, as it says, the interviewer gets interviewed. Normally, she's in the other chair. My guest today is Tracy Metz. And normally I do a long introduction, but of course, she has done it for me.
My name is Tracy Metz. I'm a journalist, author, and moderator living here in the Netherlands. I'm actually originally from California, but after college I came to Europe and fell in love with Amsterdam, and I've been here ever since. Then I started in journalism and have also written a number of books, including the book Sweet and Salt, Water and the Dutch, about how the Dutch approach to water management is changing now that the climate is also changing, forcing the Dutch to reevaluate their process of raising the banks and pumping harder and harder. Maybe that's not the solution for the future anymore. I'm also the director of the John Adams Institute, named after the second president of the United States and the first ambassador from the US to the Netherlands and to France, which is a nonprofit which brings the best and the brightest of American thinking to the Netherlands.
And ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, here is my guest of today, Tracy Adams. Tracy Metz. Oh, don't I love that? Oh, since when did I call you Tracy Adams? Well, that's why I put myself on the bottom, Tracy. Oh my goodness. I know that Mark Goldman is watching us. From Los Angeles. He said, "Hi, Mark, we would be there." And actually, look, he's on our comments. Hi, Mark. Listen, I did it again. I keep calling. It's a great thing to do. I keep calling my guests and giving them new names. Welcome, Tracy, and thank you very much for being here on this.
Thank you, Audrey. It's a thrill to be on Talking with Audrey.
Thank you very much. Well, like I said, the interviewer gets interviewed, so this is quite exciting for me. First of all, Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you. It can only get better, right?
Yes, definitely. We have a lot of things to enjoy and also a lot of things to discover. But, first of all, we're discovering you right now. As you said in the introduction, and I'm going to read of my cheat sheet because I have never seen such a long CV. So if I may, you are, I need to tell me later about this, born at the Edwards Air Force Base in California.
That's right.
We'll definitely get back. You are 66 years young. Listen, in these interviews, I always tell people we celebrate every year that we have. I see, by the way, from Santo Domingo, Lucia is joining us. Hi, Lucia. You're a journalist. We have a Dutch, very well-known newspaper called the NRC. You've been a journalist for the Parool, the Architectural Record. You're an author of books such as Sweet and Salt and Water and the Dutchman, House in France. You are the founder and presenter of a live Dutch talk show called City Life, Stadsleven. You are the director of the John Adams Institute, which is the Center for American Culture. You're a bilingual moderator. I don't know how many languages you'll speak. You can tell me in a minute. And a frequent guest on TV and radio. You received the Loeb Fellowship in 2007, visiting fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. And now you're also a podcaster. Tracy, you know what? That was your CV, and I probably didn't get half of it. But actually, I'm going to start. First of all, tell me about being born on the Edwards Air Force Base in California.
My dad was in the Air Force, in the Army Air Force during the war. And that's where he met my mom in England when he was in England for the Air Force. And when he came back to California, to Los Angeles, which is where I'm from, he went to study on the GI Bill, became an engineer. And in order to repay the the GI Bill, you have to go back to the services for a while. So he went back to the Air Force, working on Edwards Air Force Base, which I only discovered later, Audrey, is a super cool place, which is where they first broke the sound barrier, which
Oh,
is
wow.
where all the hot pilots were stationed, and it's also where the space industry was born. And after our years on Edwards Air Force Base, my dad went to work at Jet Propulsion Laboratory in the space industry as a rocket scientist. So I love it when people say, "Oh, that's no rocket science." And I think, hey, I know what rocket science is.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. I mean, you didn't get it from a stranger. So that was dad. And can you tell us something a little bit about your mom?
Yeah, she was a young English girl, met my dad during the war. I can testify that he looked absolutely dashing in his uniform. She fell in love, they fell in love, and she went from England to marry him in California, which must have been a huge
Wow.
cultural shock for her.
Hmm.
Uh, and they were like so many young post-war families, starting a family and looking to build a new life after the war.
Hmm.
That must have been a quite a huge step for her.
Mm. So can you tell me the trail from, and I think I'm hearing a little bit of sound, and maybe that your sound's a little bit high. Apologies if we know we hear something else, but the other story is, tell me exactly the route from California to Amsterdam, which is actually, we're not that very far away from each other right now. So tell me how you get there, and I'm sure it's quite a journey.
Well, actually, it was really simple, Audrey. I went to Pomona College in Claremont, in California. I studied French and Spanish,
Mm.
and I decided after school that I would like to go to Europe and perfect my French and Spanish. And I bought a ticket to Europe. And on the day I bought a ticket, Amsterdam was the cheapest destination. It was just that simple. And I thought, well, it's all new to me, so that's fine. And of course, when you're going traveling after college, cheap is good. And a cheap ticket was great. And I got to Amsterdam and I immediately fell in love with the place. It's so
Mm.
unbelievably different from Los Angeles.
Mm. Even though we have a lot of people, absolutely, we have a lot of Angelinos come to Amsterdam. I think there must be something that they recognize to go ahead and, I think the free feeling of this country, and obviously the liberal part of it, but we will get to that in just a minute. So tell me, I just talked about a long list of everything that you've done. So what would be your first memory of, becoming, first of all, a moderator, a journalist, and everything? What brings Tracy to journalism? Is it the curiosity? Tell me about the steps that brought you to this amazing career.
Well, I have had a lot of luck and what we nowadays call random acts of kindness from strangers. One
Mm.
of the things I did living in Holland when I messed around for years after college. Kids can't do that anymore. I traveled, I did odd jobs, I did all sorts of crazy stuff. One of the things I did here in Amsterdam was teaching English as a foreign language. And one of the people in my advanced course was the editor of the newspaper Het Parool. And he said to me, you're curious, you write well, you speak well. I really think journalism would be the thing for you. And I thought, whoa, in Dutch? I spoke Dutch, but not that well. And he said, I really think that this would be the thing for you. And I had never even entertained the idea. And I was given an apprenticeship of 6 months at the newspaper, Het Parool, the Dutch Amsterdam paper.
Mhm.
And I think my first day in journalism is probably one of the most memorable days of my life. It was
Tell me.
March 3rd, 1980. I remember it exactly. because the 80s were the high times of the squatters' riots here in Amsterdam. A lot of buildings were left standing empty. There was a lot of speculation, and there was a very strong civic movement by young people saying, this is bad for our city, this is bad for our housing market, these places must be inhabited. So there was a strong squatters movement, and they had squatted a hotel on that day. And I remember that on my first day in journalism was the first time ever that the city of Amsterdam sent the tanks in to get the squatters out. And it was like a pitched battle. It was something nobody here had ever seen before. And I certainly hadn't. So it was really an extraordinary, exciting day to be in journalism and to realize, oh, now I'm at the office, but next time I'll be out there. Next time I'll be right in the middle of things. And I think that feeling of being right in the middle of things, whichever things those are, but right in the middle of whatever you find important, is for me what makes journalism such an exciting profession.
Oh, it's an amazing profession. But then again, you've done so many different things, and interesting thing, and in Dutch, that the saying, and I don't know, you may be able to translate it, schoenmaker blijft bij je leest, which means, you literally, you choose one thing. So normally I always hear, even my father or parents say, stick to one thing and make sure you're good at it. What made you do all these other things? Because you became a journalist, and then what was the jump to, the John Adams Institute and to Stadslave? And so how do you attach all those things together? Because when I first met you, and mind you, viewers, and by the way, Fraser, hi Fraser, I see hello from Edinburgh. So on the left, Tracy and I can see who all is joining us, Lucia, Santo Domingo, Mark from Los Angeles, our CEO. Co-founder, very excited because it's 8:00 in Los Angeles, a few hours later in the East Coast, and obviously here. What made you weave almost all those professions together?
The John Adams is a different thing. We'll get to that in a moment. But I think in many ways, all the things I do are just different expressions of the same mentality, that same curiosity, that same urge to tell stories so that we understand our surroundings better. I think coming from LA and moving to Amsterdam, I was really struck by the whole different mentality behind these places. LA is about space. It's huge, it's sprawled, it's spread out. You have to have a car. It takes you 2 hours to go anywhere. And Amsterdam is a very compact, vibrant, dense city. And I'd never seen anything like it. And I saw that people ran into people they knew on the street. They could walk to work. They could walk to school or to the shops or to the movies. And I thought, wow, this is an entirely different way of life. And that is inspired by the physical constellation of the city. And that in turn is a product of the culture. And it has to do with the price of land. Of course, in the Netherlands, a small country where all the land has had to be won from the sea, land is at a premium. In the US, land is expansive. It's huge. We don't have a feeling of scarcity. So the whole idea of what a city is and how you build it and how you live in that city is totally different from my mother country to my adopted country. And I think in retrospect, Audrey, that's probably what got me interested in issues of how we relate to our built and natural environment and how we create the places where we live and how we feel about them, how we maintain them, how we invest in them, and also what we expect of our government.
I think,
as I was telling you, I think all of these things that I do, my talk show, City Life, my work for the newspaper, my books, I've written 8 books of my own and contributed to many more. All of these are a different form of expression, but driven by the same journalistic impulse of curiosity and finding out the story and wanting to tell that story.
I've never, it's funny because you and I have known each other for, longer than today, except this is the first time that I've actually found out. I'm actually learning something from this interview myself, which is, the whole idea behind it. It's interesting how you place it that way. And now I understand your passion also when you do, whether you moderate and interview guests or when you're making your shows. It's interesting that, you're a bilingual moderator, but I know that your Dutch is fluent. And what I'm interested in is then, can you tell me what the difference is right now in your own life? Are you an American? Are you a Dutchie? Are you a Dutch American? What do you feel like, international?
Good question. I wonder that myself, to tell you the truth. I have dual nationality, which I think really does reflect my own personal reality living in this country.
Hmm.
People also often ask me, are you Dutch? Do you feel Dutch?" And I don't say yes, even though I've lived here now much longer than I have in the US, because I grew up in the US.
Hmm.
And that makes all the difference. I grew up in one of the important differences between Dutch and American culture is that I grew up in a culture that prizes excellence.
Hmm.
And the Dutch have a much more equalizer attitude to excellence. They want to, the averages here pretty much the most important thing. Not sticking out, not being too bold or too showy,
Hmm.
and that's an important difference between the culture that I grew up in and the one that I now live. Fortunately, that hasn't hindered me in any way, but that is a really significant cultural difference.
Hmm.
So by now, I feel very Dutch, and I do indeed speak Dutch quite fluently. People don't hear that I'm not Dutch until I
No,
say my name, Tracy, and then they think,
I
"Hey,
know.
that sounds American."
And I loved it because you could start.
But I still feel that I have, and I think that's part of my added value.
We have a little bit of delay. Apologies.
I think that's part of my added value here is that I do have yeah, the eye of the outsider because I didn't grow up here. I still look at Dutch culture as a bemused and amused participant, but not as one of the native players.
Hmm. So that obviously brings me to someone very important in your life. And when I say Baptiste Brailler, tell me about this wonderful man who I've had the pleasure to meet, your husband, and tell me that story because it's a very big jump, but we're talking about different cultures. So how did that come about?
Uh, there's one important thing that Baptiste and I, well, we share a lot, but one of them is also a bit of our background. He grew
Mhm.
up as a child of expats and lived the first 12 years of his life in the Middle and Far East. So he also came to the Netherlands when it was time to go to high school, also a little bit as an outsider.
Mhm.
So it's often interesting to share our perspectives on Dutch culture as with this shared outsider perspective. We actually met on stage. I was invited to give a talk about the book that I had just recently published. This was in 2003.
Mhm.
And he was invited to give a talk about his profession and his business, which is a combination of uh, uh, data information on public space and on amenities. And his business, Locatus,
Mhm.
was and is the monopolist on this information, business to business.
Amazing.
And we thought, well, that was an interesting talk, and I thought the same thing. And he gave me a lift back to Amsterdam, and then we met again later for dinner, and um, then love took over.
The rest is history, right? Is Baptiste your biggest critic?
Yeah. Fortunately, history is still ongoing, Audrey.
What? Sorry, what did you say?
I said, fortunately, history, which is still ongoing.
That's good. So I'm sorry about the fact that, and by the way, in between, I'm sorry about the delay. That's something as we're learning, it's something I cannot do in our great broadcast studio. And to give Tracy just a little bit of an update and everybody up there on our screen, I've been learning about all kinds of different techniques. But obviously different times of the day will give different effects. We now have a little bit of a delay, but we'll try and do our best. At this point, Mark is reacting and saying to Tracy, that's a fascinating insight into the cultural differences that he had not heard before. So thank you for that. And thank you for Andrew V for joining us also. I would like to know, Tracy, because, as I usually say, so talk to me. You've talked about your family life. Obviously, we're going to make a jump to an amazing life. I'd like to talk about the John Adams Institute, because when I returned back to the Netherlands, I did not know until we met each other at the American Women's Club of Amsterdam that there was even such a great cultural center. And I know that there's a gigantic group of people that do, and obviously now we are unable to get together, but will hopefully soon. How were you asked to be the director? Would you tell me? And tell people who do not know what the John Adams Institute is, please. Could you tell me what it entails?
Let me do that first, Audrey. The John Adams Institute is a not-for-profit foundation. There's only one in the Netherlands. It is not a government institution. A lot of people think it's like the Goethe or the Descartes run by government to promote German or French culture. No, this is not an American government institution. It's an autonomous institution whose mission is to bring the best and the brightest of American thinking to the Netherlands. So normally, pre-corona, we fly people over with help of our sponsors and our donors, and bring them in to talk about their work, their thoughts. We have literary people coming. We do nonfiction, so politics, economics, journalism, history, and we also have a tech series. Mm-hmm. And of course, tech is one of the areas in which people most look to the U.S. for innovation, which is definitely true. Mm-hmm. And I've been affiliated with the John Adams for many, many years. First, occasionally as a moderator. Mm-hmm. Then I was invited to join the board. I was on the board for 9 years. Then 3 times 3 stints, I had to step down. I was very sorry to go. But just then, our then director, Russell Shorto, whom I'm sure you all know from the wonderful book, The Island at the Center of the World, and yes, also a fantastic book about Amsterdam. Mm. Russell had been our director for 5.5 years, and he decided to move back to the US. And he said, hey, this would really be a good thing for you to do. You can reconnect with your American heritage. You can pursue any sort of interests that you think are important for an institution like this. And I thought, wow, what a good idea. It was just like going into journalism. I needed someone else to tell me that this was actually a really good idea. Mm-hmm. And he was right. And it's now 7 years ago that I became the director. And it's fantastic. It has indeed helped me reconnect with my American background. Mm-hmm. It's gotten me much more interested in current events in the U.S. And of course, the last 4 years have been politically unbelievably tumultuous and exciting. And being at the John Adams has provided me with a podium to present American culture and all the things that I think are important about it. So I think it's just a fantastic institution, and I just hope that more people hear about it. And especially since Corona, mm-hmm, since our last live event was on Super Tuesday, and ever since we've been online. And the advantage of online is that anybody can join, anybody can watch. It's fabulous. And it's also given us an opportunity to bring more than one speaker. For example, on our event after the election, we had 5 speakers. We can do that now.
Yeah,
So there are advantages.
That's amazing. I know exactly, and if I'm correct, I think on the 6th of January you're having your next event, talking about whether Georgia will be runoff. Talking about the runoffs for the 2 seats, whether the Democrats will get I can't speak, the majority in the House. Please tell me. Sometimes we get the Dutch and the American mixed up. So tell people, how can they watch and how can they join? Do they just go to the johnadamsinstitute.com or .nl? And we'll do a shout out because I know I'll be watching, seeing what's happening. Tell us how we find out.
Oh, great. Glad to hear it, Audrey. Yeah, it's simple. We broadcast on our own YouTube channel, and you can find that link by going to www.john-adams.nl. And I just wanted to mention, Audrey, if I may, I think all our American listeners will know that John Adams was the 2nd president of the U.S. after George Washington, and his son, John Quincy Adams, was the 6th president of the U.S. But what people may not know is that our institution is named after John Adams because he was the first ambassador from the U.S. during the revolution against the British. He came to the Netherlands and to France to try to get money to finance the revolution. And France and the Netherlands did indeed give money, and by doing so, were the first 2 countries to recognize the very young United States of America. So that's why our institution is named after John Adams, who, of course, was one of the founding fathers of the U.S.
Tracy, I feel like I'm back in college. I literally feel like I'm getting online lessons, which is great because having the whole interview, the Talk to Audrey show, would be nice. The biggest thing, is to learn and to get away with something. By the way, right now, a shout out to all the there are 100 and something people watching right now live, which is great. Seeing part of the country is getting waking up, and the other part is getting ready to have, as we say in Europe, a glass of wine and to enjoy. I would like to know, obviously we've talked about John Adams, but I'm looking at my little cheat sheet, which I've always tell people, and in telling about what happened when, you started doing podcasting, which is recently, and where does your passion lie? Because there are so many different things. I know that, of course, being on the front end and then suddenly almost like radio, being behind a microphone and people listening to you, does that give you a completely different feeling? Do you feel like you're missing the feedback from visually? Tell me.
I was on the radio with a weekly column for a year and a half. And as you mentioned, I've done a lot of television and public speaking. And I really enjoy it because it's such a different medium from writing. Writing is slow and always painful and takes a tremendous amount of time. It also requires more effort on the part of the reader. And the wonderful thing about radio and podcasting is that it is so right there. It's so accessible, and you can tune in and tune out. And what I really enjoy about it is that it's a new way for me of learning to tell a story. And I think it's fantastic that after all my experience in books and journalism and then radio, that I get to try something new that I've never done before. I'm doing a podcast now for the Architecture Center in the Dutch town of Tilburg, but I'm actually working on a podcast of my own, which will be, again, about water. Like my book, Sweet and Salt, Water in the Dutch, also was. And it won't be about all the problems. We know what the problems are. Climate change, too little water, not enough water, too much water, too dirty water. The podcast will be about solutions. What are all the brilliant ideas that our engineers, our landscape architects, our designers, our citizens are coming up with to address our water issues? And there are a lot of really bright ideas. I don't know if those ideas will ultimately be a solution because climate change, of course, is a huge crisis,
Yes.
which we will again have to address when we are done with Corona.
Hmm.
We've sort of easily forgotten about that, but it is still there. And so I'm hoping that this podcast will help people feel a little less hopeless about climate change, that there are
Hmm.
things that they can do, that there are brilliant solutions out there.
Hmm. Is that it? And obviously, I'm hearing passion, and I understand. So when you're talking about your podcast, obviously, I cannot in this year because it's not. It's only in actually a few days that we will have a handover from one administration to the other. And here we go, Tracy, because I could not resist asking you. Um, do you think what do you think are the top things that should be on the list for the United States president elect? um, what should be, as far as you're concerned, be the most important things for him to and her to take care of and to start looking at?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I don't have anything very surprising to say, Audrey, because I think we all know what let's say, just the top three are. We
Hmm.
have seen during the Corona crisis an unbelievable, shocking fall into poverty by
Hmm.
millions and millions of Americans. I just read this weekend that 1 in 6 Americans does not have enough to eat.
Oh my.
8.3 million Americans have fallen into poverty just in these few months. This is going to be a really urgent issue for Biden to address, especially
Mhm.
since the bigger stimulus package now also failed in Senate, which I
Yeah,
find just incredible.
yeah, I know.
Um, we will have to address in a serious fashion issues of equality in the U.S.
Hmm.
The whole Black Lives Matter movement has made it abundantly clear that America has a lot to do to catch up and to bring all its citizens into a position of equality with each other. It's something that the U.S. has been talking about certainly all my lifetime and long before.
Hmm.
And the Black Lives Matter movement has really shown us that it is high time.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned, the third thing, which I think will be at the top of the list, is the climate crisis. And I'm so glad to know that Biden wants to rejoin the Paris Treaty and really start working on this. Whether he will be able to will
Hmm.
depend in large part on whether he can get his legislation through the Senate. And
Hmm.
that's why the runoffs in Georgia on Tuesday are so very important. And we'll be
Yeah.
talking about that on Wednesday.
Absolutely. So that's another great reason to watch the John Adams Institute on the 6th of January. I believe it's at 9 p.m. I think, and I'm happy to plug that because if I'm anywhere near the screen, then I will definitely be behind the computer. Um, I think that here in Holland we actually have some challenges also.
8
How much?
p.m. 8 p.m. Time, Audrey.
8 p.m. Apologies, 8 p.m. Thank you for correcting me. I think in Holland we also have some challenges. So for viewers, across the globe watching and who will be watching in the next few days and hours, what do you think right now, with our political elections coming up for the Netherlands, is something that we should be concentrating on? And what should the rest of the world know? And I don't know if many people know, but Holland, for the tiny country that it is a quite rich country in the matter of still having a monarchy who is not in the decision, because we have a prime minister who communicates obviously with our houses. But what do you think is something that we should be looking for, and we could advise any internationals here, that is interesting for the Netherlands to take into consideration before we start voting?
Certainly for internationals, this is in many ways a great place to locate. The country is geographically well located. We have a great airport. We're well connected to the rest of the world. All those logistics are really good. We do have big issues in the housing market, which are also connected with inequality. It's almost impossible for younger people now to rent or buy a home. There is really a huge housing crisis, especially in the cities.
Yeah.
And the Netherlands has just not been able, even since the Second World War, to get its housing stock up to grade to meet the demand. The demand has always been so much greater than the supply, which is not the case in the countries around us in Europe. I don't understand why we have been so laggard on this. And there have also been a couple painful incidents in national politics here, which I think have shown us that government has, in this country, become too much an end to itself and has is not caring for its citizens in the way that I think Dutch government traditionally has. One has been the whole series of earthquakes up in the north of the country, because we've extracted so much natural gas from below the ground that the ground has become unstable. People's houses have cracked and started falling apart, and the government has been very slow to remedy this and to help contribute to their peace of mind and to their safety. And we've also had a recent affair here where government was very distrustful of people who were asking for child support. And these 22,000 families were regarded as seemed to be committing fraud when maybe they just made one tiny administrative mistake on their application form. And I think this really shocked a lot of Dutch people, because this made it so clear that too often government doesn't feel it's there to protect its citizens. It sees them as, it distrusts them. And this issue of distrust of government, of its own citizens, is something that the Dutch are not used to. I think generally the relationship between citizens and government is pretty good here. And this has been quite a shock, especially coming so short before elections. Nobody knows whether we'll have a cabinet when we actually do go to elections in the middle of March.
Once again, you gave me a lot of information. You're giving a lot of us a lot of things to think about, which is great, which is why I love having you on the show. When I'm looking at the live chats that are coming in. By the way, Kim, thank you for subscribing and joining us also. Michael is adding something completely different after you telling us all the things that we need to be thinking about, and we will not necessarily need to be worried about, but actually that need to have a bigger, almost an hourglass view on what's happening. Michael's asking us, what brings you a sense of peace, Tracy? Good question, Michael.
A sense of peace.
Yep.
I do really, truly still believe in this country. And I must say, especially after having seen the way Trump abandoned his citizens in the past 4 years, to my mind, comparing that to the tradition of trust between citizens and government here. I mean, always be critical, never just assume that people in power will not abuse that power, because power does that to people. But maybe I can illustrate this best, Audrey, with an example from the world of water, which I know well since my book and now working on this podcast. Dutch government takes water protection measures that are intended for the next 100 to 200 years. If you look at the dikes and levees in the US, they can hardly manage a water disaster that might happen next week. They're speed bumps. They're not real dikes. And there's no national coordination, no sense that this is a responsibility of government to protect its citizens from water disasters, or from water shortages for that matter. And the Dutch government is in it for the long haul, and people know that. People don't protest at paying taxes for water protection. We pay $1 billion a year in taxes to take care of our water situation here, and And people just accept that. We pay generally much higher taxes than in the US because we know that we're going to get services.
Mhm.
And the government is there for us. And I think that's why these recent events that I just mentioned have been such a shock,
Mhm.
because people have felt let down in a pretty fundamental way. But I think maybe I'm just naive and want to believe it, but I still feel that the basis here is good and safe.
It, I completely agree with you. I think, for such a small country that we are, 17 million inhabitants, the fact that we are tiny, but yet a very innovative, especially as far as water is concerned, innovative country. We not only, assist the United States also with their water problems, but in dikes and building and barging, worldwide. We
All over
do
there.
worldwide. We do that, all over the place. I wonder if, trying to stay positive, the United States, what do you see as the shift is coming towards Europe? Because of course, having my own company, Expat in Amsterdam, having brought for the last, 8+ years, brought internationals over to the to Amsterdam from the United States, but also from the rest of the world, Australia, South Africa, all over. What do you think is going to happen, not only with this American administration, and I don't want to just stick to politics, but when not only the inauguration has been, but obviously in the next few weeks, when people are really thinking whether they're pro Biden or pro Trump, do you think there will be well, it's not possible right now, but almost when it is possible, an invasion into Europe? Sounds very dramatic, but you know what I mean. Do you think people will be flooding the United States? Do you think they'll
Yeah,
be staying? I heard a yes, but I'm
I
waiting for
don't
you.
think. I think the panic flight has probably already happened for individuals, but I
Mm-hmm,
think a lot of businesses will be coming this way
mm-hmm,
because Europe is a huge market, and I hope that once we've gotten through all the uh, starting hiccups with Brexit, that things will become clearer,
mm-hmm.
that it's a great place for American companies to land, also because they get great tax benefits from the Dutch government, which, of
True.
course, within the Netherlands itself is a bone of contention. But generally now, the conditions for working here, everyone speaks English,
Mm-hmm,
there are clear rules, there's not much corruption. All
mm-hmm,
those things make it a really good launching
mm-hmm.
and probably less fraught by deep, deep troubles than the U.S. now in the aftermath of the corona virus disaster.
Mm. Well, I must tell you, I've never had that being, hi, Helen from Edinburgh, who's just joined us. I've never had disaster be the last word almost to be during an interview. I would therefore like to ask you, as I did with Mark Goldman, our dear CEO and co-founder of HAPS, I would like to give you 5 words and I'd like to have your reaction. And then we are almost going to wrap it up, but I'd like to tell you, the first word, and please react with 1 word if you wouldn't mind. Family.
Love.
Um, Journalism.
Exciting.
We have a little bit of delay. I love it. Dream.
Big.
2021.
better.
Tracy Metz, thank you very much. And for those of you who are wondering why there was such a long wait, we have had a little bit of delay in this interview, but it has been.
Can I add one? Audrey, can I just add?
Sure, you can. Go ahead. You want one more word?
I just want to add one word that I think is probably one of the key. I want to add one word to your list, which I think is one of the key words of our time and after Corona and moving forward to elections in both our after elections and moving towards elections in this country. I think an incredibly important word of our time is trust.
Oh, very, very well said. I cannot even add anything more to it than to say thank you. It is trust is the basis of all. Trust is the basis of world peace, obviously. And I'm humbled once again that you have allowed me to have you as a guest. And I love the fact that I'm learning from you. Because as it says, the interviewer gets interviewed. And that was quite exciting for me, thinking, oh my goodness. I would like to wish you a lot of health. We're not that far away from each other, but it seems like as if there's oceans between us. It's actually, we're talking from Amsterdam to Amsterdam. People, don't you just love this? Tracy, I can't wait to see you online. I cannot wait. Thank you, Kim. Kim says, thanks for a great broadcast. Thank you very much to everyone who has been watching us live. You'll be able to see this interview again, as we'll be posting it all over social media. I hope you've gotten to know my special guest, Tracy Metz. For those of you who did not know her yet, hi, Michael from Toronto. And I definitely look forward to this year being the year we wish it to be. I wish you lots of health, and I hope to see and speak to you soon. Tracy Metz, thank you very much, and have a good evening. Tot ziens. Bye.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Delightful. Tot ziens.
Bye. Bye.